Okay, I think we can get started. So we'll have some more people joining as we go on. But first, I'd like to say good afternoon and good morning, everyone that's on. Welcome to our session, Demystifying Sign-On Once. It's a webinar sponsored by ID Federation. My name is Irv Kantar. I'm the business manager at ID Federation, and I'm pleased to present our panel for today's session. Let me slide here so you get to see everyone. First, we have Jim Rogers, Assistant Vice President, Distribution Technology Strategy at the Hartford. Jim is also the President and Treasurer of ID Federation. Next, we have Mike Foy. Mike is the agency owner of Foy Insurance in New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts. Then we have Toby Plummer. Toby is the Information Systems Manager at MMG Insurance. And then we have Nelli Massoni. She's the Director of Product Management at Vertafore. And that will be our panel for the day. Before we get started, I have a couple housekeeping items that I can go through. We encourage you to send any questions. You'll see there's a little chat bubble in the top right of your screen that you can click on that. You can send it to everyone if you would like, and we'll respond to your questions after we've gone through the presentation. You can also change the view options, so you can either see everybody, see no one, or see only the speaker. And then finally, I would ask that you click the mute button so you mute yourself so we can keep the background noise to a minimum. With that, let's get started. First question I have is, Jim, as a founding member of ID Federation, could you give us a brief overview of the organization?
Sure. Wow, we started many years ago, I guess, with a premise where a couple of us from the industry were sort of imagining a world where every agency only needed one ID and one password. And from that, we decided to create sort of an insurance industry specific coalition to really eliminate the need for repetitive sign-ons for agencies and to carriers. And so we've been working towards that mission for the last couple of years. And we've significantly, over the years, every year, just continue to grow our membership. We're proud to have about 23 members and growing, both from agencies, from associations, from carriers across the industry, and from technology vendors and providers to actually join us to round out, all the different points of view that there is on security and federation. But we've had some success. We'll talk about it here today. And I'm looking forward for everybody to learn a little bit more about Sign-On Once and how you can help the industry eliminate the needs for continuing managing passwords.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Toby, can you share with us, as a relatively new implementer of Sign-On Once, can you share with us why MMG decided to implement Sign-On Once, and what advantages did you see in moving forward with it?
Yes, hello. Yeah, primarily it's all about ease of doing business with our agencies. We try hard at MMG to make it easy for people to do business with us, and we saw this as another great opportunity to do that. We are also seeing it help streamline the management of the usernames and passwords, and having that central location really helps the users out. And moving forward, we really hope this improves the industry overall, with getting others involved, having those secure connections between the carriers, the business partners, the agencies, just for an entire improved user experience for everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you, Toby. Mike, as an MMG agent, how is your agency's workflow security different with MMG than for your other carriers?
So Jim actually mentioned it, one ID, one password. So MMG brings that into reality, because the one user ID is the Vertafore user ID and the password. And with MMG, I have the option of locking it down, that the only way they can get into the MMG website or portal for our agency is through that that single sign-on process. I mean, they do have the ability to allow a password for like an administrator. But what I envisioned when I started talking with MMG and they asked about their new security protocol, so I mentioned ID Federation and Sign On Once. A lot of carriers today, we've got a fairly large agency, but I'll just take my Exeter, New Hampshire location. We have approximately 30 employees in this location, and we, for the most part, still can deploy the one ID, one password, because the insurance carriers, most of them, are not requiring us to implement individual user IDs and passwords. The carriers that have required that over the last couple of years have had difficulty with expiring passwords and difficulty in my agency with what I call a casual user. So that would be somebody that might only go to the carrier portal once every 30 days, once every 60 days, and often going there finding out that for those carriers that have implemented or required the, everybody have their own, they're locked out. If they're locked out, they can't get a hold of an administrator to reset them. They move on to another carrier. The other workflow or security issue MMG has allowed me is when an employee leaves, I disconnect them from my Vertafore system, so that sign on once. They are now disconnected from the MMG portal. I don't have to notify MMG, and we typically will notify a carrier once every 90 to 180 days that someone has left, unless it's somebody that we suspect will cause a problem. But we recently had, about a year ago, somebody leave. We notified all our carriers that this individual had left. We weren't clear whether they had individual user IDs or passwords because it was a manager. And it literally took me 3 months to get verification that this person's access had been removed, because there were probably half a dozen carriers that for some reason just couldn't process that, or couldn't tell me that the process was, oh, Mike, we don't do it. You have to sign in as administrator and take care of it. So it was very frustrating. And I just see that as a security issue going forward. And as an agency, if I want to be able to control my destiny, I need something like ID Federation single sign-on or some sort of ID federated password management tool.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Toby, from the time you said, let's go, can you walk us through the process for your implementation and testing?
Certainly. Yeah, it all began with what Mike Foy was talking about with us changing our security protocol with individual accounts, and that was a big driver at the beginning. As also reached out to Jim Rogers from the Hartford really early on. He was instrumental in providing our team guidance, like, do we really want to tackle this or not? What's involved? So that was very helpful from the get-go to get us on board. And then we started out with working with Irv from ID Federation and Mike, and then got a hold of Nelli and Wendy from Vertafore and others, and a few conference calls and to get that process started. We went through the trust framework documentation that's out there on ID Federation for Sign On Once, reviewed all the standards with our technical team. We performed a thorough security review with the director of IT. Everything panned out, looked good. We subscribed and now support the entity through ID Federation. It's fantastic documentation out there, so it's an excellent place to start. From there, we kicked off the project internally with the MMG team. We're a Scrum and Agile shop, so we have Scrum teams. So we got that team involved with the BAs and QA and project management. And then we set up regular check-in meetings with Vertafore and Nelli and Mike and Irv and others. Every week, we would just check in to see how things are progressing on each end. And throughout that, we started taking on some of the programming work, which really there wasn't a ton of programming involved. A lot of it was the coordination because we already had a good infrastructure in place on our side. Probably a week or so of programming spread across 10 to 12 weeks of the coordination and the firewall supports, the getting our sub-production environment in the state ready to collaborate with the right parties. And then from there, we piloted with Mike Foy from the Foy agency. Again, it's instrumental in helping out. Everything tested out great and working well since. So then we just went live with Vertafore TNAV through VSSO, and also I believe we're one of the first carriers on PL rating as well. We implemented those at the same time. Mm-hmm. So we're very pleased with how things are going so far.
Great. Thanks, Toby. Now to Nelli. Can you tell us, Nelli, the supportive role the Vertafore plays in the process when a new carrier begins the implementation?
Sure, of course. Yeah, so this is very exciting, and of course, working with all of the carriers has been pretty wonderful. But essentially, what we do, kind of to what Toby was saying, is we get our team together along with the carriers team, and of course, we do rely on the carrier to be able to follow the technical standards and the guidelines that are recommended by the ID Federation group, because obviously we don't want to build this 600 different ways, and essentially having the scheduled meetings with the carrier and their technical team and their security teams. We go through different phases, typically, just so people know. There's like initial work that has to be done when the carrier's done with their side of it, exchanging metadata in different environments, and just making sure that we're always on track. And most of the time a carrier wants to work with some pilot agencies, so we work with them on that as well. What I found, and I realize you didn't ask me this, but I'm thinking some of the carriers on the call might be interested in this. What we found is probably one of the more difficult things for carriers to tackle, is within their own infrastructure, as far as being able to correlate. So now, I mean, every carrier's policy admin or every carrier's agent portal is relying on a user ID or password as authentication, and to now change that to really a more secure federated token is typically where a lot of the work is. But we're there to help throughout the entire process, and happy to do it.
Great. Thanks, Nelli.
Mm-hmm.
Toby, since you've recently gone through, can you maybe share what recommendations you would have for carriers that are considering it, and also any lessons to share, lessons learned as you went through the process?
Yeah, definitely the key is to look through the ID Federation trusted framework documentation that's out there. There's some good work put into that, and just following that is a really good place to start. And that was key in helping us also. The other thing I encourage is just talk to peers, attend these. I talked to Jim, myself, others that have gone through it. We're willing to share some of our experiences, some of the technical aspects of it as well. As Jim mentioned to me before, we're not about competing on security or infrastructure. We're all here willing to help the industry and to share. So definitely reach out to us, and we can be of help also. Yeah. Holding those regular check-in coordination meetings were instrumental. Also, highly encourage those regular meetings, and having a good agency partner to help, like we did with Mike, to pilot and to help work through the process. That's a big key also for us.
Yeah, and I think that's great that you said there's a lot of people that have gone through this, that have done some things, that are always willing to help and share with others that are looking to implement. Jim, you were the first carrier to implement SignOn once. Do you have anything to add about the experience that Toby went through, and talk about from a carrier perspective what it means to the Hartford?
Yeah, I mean, for the Hartford, we have a lot of Vertafore agents now federated with us. I think what it To us, it just means it's easier for agents to do business with us because they don't have to remember expiring passwords or anything like that. But also on the carrier side, a significant reduction in our online support costs with our help desk on people forgetting their IDs, resetting their passwords, things like that. I mean, we've seen no issues actually with our federated agents ever since we've implemented this, which was a few years ago. Whether it's with large bank-owned entities or very small agencies, say that are using Vertafore's VSSO and the federation that they use. So whether it's from a small agency to a gigantic organization, it really didn't matter. We still got the same experiences through and continued to reduce our online support calls. Typically in the industry that may run 25% of your calls are managing that. I mean, at the Hartford, it was like more like 13%. But when we go to Federation, we really don't have any calls in regards to that. So I think it's been a win-win both from the carrier side and the agency side to get more transactions through. I think it was, like Mike said, you kind of have to think of all the different ways that you're connected, say, to whoever the identity provider is. In this case, it was with Vertafore, making sure they can get to our agent portal seamlessly, making sure, PL rating works, making sure Transact Now and its inquiries are fine, or endorsement transactions, or new business flowing into our systems. They're calling all different APIs at the Hartford, and just to make sure that all those different points of view, are taken into consideration, as many of the carriers on the phone. You just kind of need to think through all those connection points. And I think, Toby, you did something similar, right? Just kind of audited where you're connected and how you guys went through it.
Okay.
Very similar.
Yeah, similar concept. So Irv, those are just some of the, what we've seen and experiences that we've had and, over the past few years.
Okay, great. That's great. Mike, can you tell us why? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just was, Jim, there's a question from Kevin McNamara. I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, I'll give that a try. So Kevin, what plans exist to utilize commercially available products like Okta to further enable federated SSO between parties? So I think, sometimes I think people think the ID federation is like the transactions are like flowing through us, and they're really not. We're really like a trust framework or a legal entity that helps guide the industry with what the framework of the standards will be and how we can utilize, the legal side of the framework and all of that. So I think Octave and many of the other identity providers that use those are fine to use. We have partners that use, I'm trying to think, like Oracle's FIM product or ForgeRock or Microsoft's ADFS, or, there's lots of different ways that you may have federation. On the identity provider is the one who, we go through all the security certification processes for. We've gone that through with Vertafore, we've gone it through with Apply, and actually we're re-going through those again. But I would say, as more commercial products that carriers want to utilize like that, or identity providers want to utilize, that's totally fine. I would just, they're going to go through a certification process. So as long as they live up to the industry standards and certification processes that you need to have a trust framework, I think those are fine.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim, and thanks for the question, Kevin. Mike, I had a question for you. Can you touch on why it's important from an agency's point of view? The carriers embrace this and put it on their roadmaps to get it done?
I touched a little bit about it, earlier, but one of the things that I often see from carriers is the security that's pushed out to agents is oftentimes developed by carrier security people for their own employees. And I've often used the word, there's a Band-Aid approach given to the agents. And, it's almost like the security people don't realize that, we have lots and lots and lots of user IDs and passwords to deal with to do our job as independent agents, because we represent a variety of different carriers. And as the agency gets larger, it gets more difficult to do that. From my point of view, what I'm seeing is when the carrier pushes out this new security protocol, it often comes with contractual forms that an agency needs to sign. And as an agency owner that actually reads the contracts, I'm often having to go back to the carrier, going through the legal department to get something changed, because I'm not comfortable with signing my name to a situation where I really have no control of what my employee does with their user ID and password. So that's, like I said, as Jim said right in the beginning, one ID, one password, and I can control it. The nice part with the VSSO, I can say, as an example, I want to change it every 30 days instead of every 60. 60 is the longest we can go. I can make the requirement be 12 characters instead of, I think it's 6 or 8 now. I can also, if I thought I had a security issue or a breach, I can make everybody change their password instantly by requiring that through that VSSO process. So it gives an agency a lot more control. And I believe you would probably find, if you were talking to some of the larger agencies that are tied with banks, they probably have some sort of protocol in place. And I don't know if Nelli or Jim can probably talk to that, but it's something I think over the next few years, you're going to see more insurance departments get laws enacted. In fact, I think there's 13 or so states enacting the NAIC model come January 1st. I know New Hampshire's one of them. So you're going to see a few more things come out at the state level. Oftentimes not giving us solutions, just giving us penalties when something goes wrong. But I also will just throw out there, if any carrier wants to contact me, and we don't represent them, mike.foy@foyinsurance.com. I have a presentation I did for the New England NetView users group last fall with some screenshots, so I can actually show you what an agency that uses a Vertafore product would see. And Toby, hopefully you're not mad, but I show a couple of the MMG screens on the setup too. So
That's good. I was kind of assuming that as you were talking.
Mike, you kind of touched a little bit on MFA. Can you expand on that a little bit? I mean, about a year and a half ago, that's all we were hearing was that, first it was the New York DFS and then NAIC. What's the status? What are you hearing, or what are your carriers telling you as far as MFA goes now?
What I'm mostly hearing about MFA is it doesn't apply to agencies connecting to carriers. I don't know the validity to that, but that's a stance that a lot of carriers are taking. Okay. The nice part about ID Fed with Vertafore and the T-Now product is we can institute MFA at that level. So not only can we control the one ID, one password, we can have one MFA process. If that became a requirement, an agency could do that.
Okay.
I got to work with Vertafore on a couple issues I have with them, but other than that, it's. But MFA really, for the most part, sending a PIN number somewhere is. The carriers that have instituted MFA and require a PIN, if you're on the call now, I think we've had 4 carriers that have done it. 2 we've canceled. 1 we write no business with now, and the other one is a specialty carrier, so we deal with it. So that's what our agency feels on MFA, how difficult it is.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Nelli, anything you can share or would like to share about how MFA, multi-factor authentication, works with Vertafore with VSSO?
Sure. So we do have it. So the way we have implemented MFA is that we have it available across our product suite for agents to turn on if they choose to do it. So it is there, and it does work exactly like kind of like what Mike was saying. You know, you can have code sent to your phone. Like there's various different ways of implementing it in the you know, across our products. I don't have any stats on it, but I mean, it would be interesting to see, you know, how many agents are actually implementing the MFA. But yeah, I mean, we made it super easy. I mean, I have it in you know, in my own, you know, I know how it's set up in my own products as well, like in Bookroll and things like that. Super easy to set up, but I'm just curious to see if more agents are like Mike, where they would rather not deal with it, I guess. But the federation, though, really, I mean, helps. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the problem with MFA is, yeah, it saves it in your cookie maybe for 30 days, but you know, as an agency where it seems like on a weekly basis, we have to clear our cookies for one reason or another because of the variety of carriers we're dealing with. If somebody calls you know, I would say as a carrier, go back to your help desk, and probably one of the 3 remedies that's most often used is, you know, clear your cache and your cookies. And now, if anybody ever saw my presentation with the keys, you know, all those saved MFA credentials that go away, and you got to start all over again.
Yeah. Well, and one more thing I'd like to add, Toby, thanks. You referenced the trust framework that's posted to our website, idfederation.org, at the bottom of the page on the left-hand side for anybody that's interested. That's a living, breathing document, and we recently did an upgrade to it, an update, and we added an attribute to indicate that a user had been through an MFA process when they logged into their management system. So in the case of Vertafore, I don't think they built it yet, but the plan is it will be built. So when they deliver a SAML token to a carrier, it will have that that attribute set that yes, the user went through an MFA process. And the other thing that we're working on as far as our committees go, we have a technical and a business committee, is a way to do deprovisioning automatically. So if somebody leaves Mike's agency, he'll be able to go into the Vertafore VSSO product and delete that user. And this isn't in place yet. This is what we've designed so far. This would send an information record to the carrier to deprovision, to remove it, so he doesn't have to go to 10 or 20 or 30 different carriers through an admin function. So next steps. Jim, do you have anything? Would you like to kind of cover what you would recommend a carrier do, what their next steps
Yeah,
be?
yeah, next steps, I think Toby mentioned it too. I would just take a look at our website, IDFed or SignOn once, either which way you can get to it, and take a look at the trust framework. We have a sort of a get started. If you're an agency and you want your carriers to join, we have some ways for you to engage there, some sample letters you can send, things like that. And then I know, you know, if you can get to me or Toby or some of the other carriers that have implemented, if other carriers have questions, more than glad to take that up. I think I owe one of the carriers another response back that had sent me a note on that, and more than glad to spend some time with you guys. As Toby said, we're interested in competing in our industry on service and price and product. Hopefully we don't have to compete on security though. You know, we're more than glad to help each other out. I think it's going to be an exciting time. You will see more of our partners, I think, adopt and I would say more implement our current members, and then additional members. I know a lot of our carrier partners are working on it, and so we're pretty excited for 2021 coming up, and a lot of the things in the hopper with multiple of our members, and hopefully future members to join and to help us along. We're a volunteer organization, so you know, we'd love to have as much participation in some of the meetings and things like that. So it's another way both on our business side and our technical committees, to help with the cause and with getting us in a better place for our insurance industry, at least with one ID and one password.
Yeah.
It's kind of where we started the goal, and we'd love to have more people help us out and embrace the vision and get us there.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
And also on the last slide that I put up here, if you want more information, if you are interested in speaking to a carrier, I can arrange that. You can email me at irv.kantar@idfederation.org. My phone number is also there, 833-SignOn1. And we'd be happy to coordinate. I can answer any questions on the trust framework, or if you would like to coordinate any phone calls with people that have implemented that have more technical knowledge about it than I do. So feel free to do that. And I don't see any other questions. Yep, anyone?
Irv, I was just going to add that you've also been wonderful in coordinating, with the carrier partners that are interested in federating with Vertafore through Transact Now and PL Rating. You've been wonderful with coordinating those calls as well. So, we're happy to join any of those and help carriers understand, what kinds of things that they need to do to get ready. Kind of to Toby's point, and I mean, Jim, you guys were the first ones. You guys were the trailblazers, but.
Yeah.
I think now that people more understand what it is, people being the carriers, it's not. It seems like it's an easier implementation. Let me just say it that. I mean, I don't want to speak for the carriers on board, but.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nelli. Appreciate that. If I don't see any other questions up there, so I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found it beneficial. And please do feel free to either drop me an email or give me a phone call. I'd be happy to answer questions or set up another session, as Nelli mentioned. They've been very, very great to work with. So coordinate with the Vertafore folks or any of the carriers that are already up and running. Anything else from the panel? Any other comments, questions? All right.
Good, Irv.
Well, thank you everyone for joining, and have a good rest of the day.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.